Hello and welcome to Midday Report here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Cato. Russia continued its attacks on Ukraine overnight. Drones and missiles fired by Russia reached not only the eastern regions of the country, but also the capital, Kyiv, as well as several cities in the west far from the front line. The Polish-owned Barlinek factory was also struck, known for producing wooden flooring. More on this from our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee.
3 people have been killed and 40 others injured in another wave of Russian attacks on Ukraine, with the Ukrainian government saying Russia launched 400 drones and 1 Iskander ballistic missile onto Ukrainian territory. Now, these overnight attacks targeted the Ukrainian capital, but also parts of western Ukraine, including Vinnytsia. Now, one of the targets in Vinnytsia, where 8 people were wounded overall, was a Polish-owned floor tile company owned by the Barlinek Group. Now, this attack drew immediate condemnation from the Polish government, with the Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski releasing a statement on Wednesday condemning the attack. Let's take a listen to that statement.
Russian drones struck the Barlinek Group factory in Vinnytsia. The head of the plant just told me that it was deliberate from 3 directions. There are injured people, including 2 with severe burns. Ukrainian services are on site, as well as our consulate. Putin's criminal war is getting closer to our borders.
So there is growing concern in Poland about these recent Russian attacks, which have been targeting parts of western Ukraine with increasing regularity. There is also concern here in Kyiv about this 50-day proposal from the White House to implement further sanctions on Russia if Russia should not agree to a ceasefire within 50 days. However, some of the feeling here in Kyiv is that this 50-day proposal just gives Russia impunity to continue this wave of airstrikes across Ukrainian territory for the next 50 days without any significant pressure being brought to bear on Moscow by Washington. It's Oz Chatterjee reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
The Patriot air defense missiles bound for Ukraine are already on their way to the country. The new shipments are part of an arrangement where NATO and EU member states will purchase US-made weapon systems and deliver them to Ukraine. The announcement came just 2 days after Donald Trump's ultimatum to Moscow. Trump warned that the US will impose severe tariffs unless Russia agrees to a peace deal within the next 50 days. Officials from the Kremlin called the proposed tariffs, quote, serious, saying that Moscow needs time to analyze the messages coming from Washington, D.C. Speaking from Joint Base Andrews, Trump told reporters that the Patriot missiles are on their way to Kyiv. According to the American president, the missiles come from Germany, which in turn will order new missiles from the U.S. to replenish its own stockpiles. While speaking to journalists, U.S. President Donald Trump responded to questions about Ukraine's military strategy, particularly whether Ukrainian forces should target Moscow. Trump firmly stated that Ukrainian President Zelensky should not target the Russian capital and also address the ongoing war, defending his stance on giving Russia a 50-day window before further action.
Should Zelensky target Moscow or deeper into Russia?
No, he shouldn't target Moscow.
President, why are you giving Mr. Putin 50 additional days to prosecute this war against Ukraine?
Oh, I don't think 50 days is very long, and it could be sooner than that. I don't think 50 days is very long.
Mr. President,
You should have asked that same question to Biden.
For Donald Trump, this is personal, said Scott Lucas, professor of American Studies at University College Dublin, describing the U.S. president's recent decision to impose a 50-day ultimatum on Russia or face severe sanctions.
For Donald Trump, this is personal. He's frustrated with Vladimir Putin because Trump's vision was that he could end this Russian invasion, albeit pretty much by accepting the Kremlin's conditions, but then he could get the Nobel Peace Prize and get all the glory that he seeks each and every day. The problem with those tactics is that Vladimir Putin doesn't want to make any compromise or any concessions to give Trump that Nobel Peace Prize. So not only have Russia refused to compromise by accepting a ceasefire, they've been expanding their missile and drone attacks. These are now record-setting attacks, most of them on Ukraine civilians. And there's no easing of the demands that Russia be able to seize 20% of Ukraine, that it be able to keep Ukraine weak and demilitarized, that sanctions are lifted on Moscow, and even that the Zelensky government be pushed out of power. So with no prospect of a resolution, Trump gets angry. And then you have this decision he makes, all right, we will begin to provide weapons to Ukraine.
France and Italy are stepping back from a new NATO initiative to fund U.S. weapons deliveries to Ukraine. That's according to reports from Politico and La Stampa, citing unnamed government sources. The plan, unveiled during a July 14th meeting between President Donald Trump and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, calls for NATO to purchase advanced American weapons, including air defense systems, and send some of them to Ukraine. Despite their ongoing support for Kyiv, both France and Italy say they won't take part in the funding effort. French officials say President Emmanuel Macron wants European nations to invest in their own defense industries and buy European-made weapons instead. They also point to tight budgets and rising defense spending targets. Italy is taking a similar position. Officials in Rome say they won't buy US weapons directly, citing financial constraints and a preference for systems like the Italian-French SAMPT, which is already being delivered to Ukraine. An American who secretly provided intelligence to the Russian military from inside Ukraine has been granted Russian citizenship. According to a Russian military commander, information provided by Daniel Martindale helped Russian forces plan an offensive to seize Kurkahov, a town near the logistics hub of Pokrovsk.
The citizenship ceremony for Daniel Richard Martindale was widely broadcasted on state-owned media. According to Russian media, he was granted citizenship by order of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Martindale first arrived in Russia in 2018 to study the language and teach English in the Far East city of Vladivostok. In February 2022, just before the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Martindale relocated to Poland and crossed into Ukraine. He then traveled eastwards to the Donetsk region, eventually settling in a Ukrainian village. Over the next 2 years, Martindale covertly shared intelligence with the Russian military, including information on Ukrainian troop positions.
On Wednesday, Lublin will host a significant meeting marking the 5th anniversary of the Lublin Triangle, where the foreign ministers of Poland, Lithuania and Ukraine are gathering for talks. The event will focus on strengthening regional cooperation, security and continued support for Ukraine. The day began with a solemn wreath-laying ceremony at the Union of Lublin Monument, where Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, Lithuanian Foreign Minister Kęstutis Budrys and Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha paid their respects. Later in the afternoon, the ministers will hold a press conference discussing key topics, including security in the region and ongoing support for Ukraine in their conflict with Russia. A focal point of the discussions will be the continued strengthening of trilateral cooperation, with a special emphasis on military collaboration through the joint multinational brigade based in Lublin. The Lublin Triangle, established in 2020, has become a key initiative for enhancing ties between these three countries, especially in supporting Ukraine's aspirations toward Euro-Atlantic integration. A medical hub set up in the southeastern Polish city of Rzeszów for Ukrainians wounded during Russian aggression has so far treated close to 3,000 people. In a report that will be aired on TVP World News tonight at 8 p.m. CET, one nurse told our reporter Anastasia Yanchenko of the hardships many of these patients experience when they are admitted.
We have cases of having small orphans, children here, that was traumatized by the war. And of course, young people that lose their extremities, their limbs. This is always a very difficult moment to, for welcoming them here in the hub, when you want to, grab their hand to visit, to just, welcome him, and they cannot give you back nothing, And you see their faces, tired faces. They lose the hope, they lose their homes, they lose their families. So definitely they lost a lot of things, not only physically but mentally. Sometimes it's very difficult to read their emotions. They are silenced, they don't want to talk, They don't want to speak to us most of the time. We see them, like I said before, we see their faces, we see their attitude. Well, most of the time, what we want to bring for them is peace, silence, and a moment of rest. But definitely, I can imagine, just imagine, that there are so much of emotions inside of them, you know, trying to, I don't know, evacuate, escape from the bodies.
Electromobility Poland has officially applied for major funding from the National Recovery Plan, hoping to jumpstart production of the country's first homegrown electric vehicle brand, Izera. The CEO of the state-owned company told TVP World why the long-anticipated project would be a welcome addition to the European market.
I think what we observe currently in the European market is that there is like a big flow of Chinese players into the market. And they are gaining more and more market share. So if you look into companies like BYD, Chery, GD, they are getting more and more. So in some countries it's close to double-digit market share. So they are expanding really fast. Yes. In the past, when the original idea behind the electric vehicle was launched, we were talking about an empty market, we might say. Yes. Right now it's a more developed market. It's a mature market in some places even, when we talk electric vehicles, and we have a lot of new players coming into. Yes, so what we need to do, we actually want to benefit from this movement of Chinese players into the European landscape.
The EU's next multi-annual financial framework is set to shift funding for regions to an approach based on member states. Talking to TVP World, Heather Grab of Bruegel, a Brussels think tank, says the new criteria will work for poorer countries, including Poland, but could be at the expense of poor regions in richer countries, as well as governments that have a habit of defying the bloc's rules.
So this new approach has pluses and minuses for governments. It means they are clearer about what kind of overall sum they will receive, and then they can negotiate on that basis. But some of them, if, for example, there's misspending, maladministration of the kind that we've seen in Hungary in past budgets, then you know, Hungary might not get as much money because they haven't actually met the conditions, or there's been evidence of fraud, or they haven't spent the money in the way that they were supposed to under the rules. So this single envelope is very different. And it also means that there's going to be less money to poorer regions. So a country that has a lower gross national income overall will probably get more money. So that's good news for the relatively poorer member states. But it means that poorer regions in better off countries, for example, the poorer regions of France or Spain or even Germany, will probably get less money because the overall national GNI of their country is higher, and there won't be a separate cohesion fund which provides specific funding for poorer regions.
French Prime Minister François Bayrou has proposed scrapping 2 national holidays as part of a €43.8 billion cost reduction plan, which was outlined on Tuesday.
The proposed cuts to national holidays, including Easter Monday and May 8th, which commemorate the Allied victory in Europe during World War II, has been condemned by various groups, including the far-right National Rally. Alongside these cuts, the plan also proposes freezing non-defense spending, pensions, welfare and health caps to address France's public finances. The decision could trigger a no-confidence vote when the cuts reach Parliament.
Axiom 4 is the mission with the highest scientific and technological components in the history of commercial spaceflight, said Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski after landing in Cologne, where he will undergo a recovery program. The Polish astronaut thanked the European Space Agency and Polish scientific institutions for their participation in what he described as a successful and groundbreaking mission.
Axiom 4 is the mission with the highest in history of commercial spaceflight, the highest scientific and technology component. We had 60 investigations during the whole Axiom 4 missions, 13 out of designed, built and sent by Polish institutes and Polish companies through ESA execution, payload integration, and everyone made it to manifest. 100% of science, 100% of objectives of the mission were executed, and that demonstrates not only the high quality but also a really strong motivation behind Polish institutes and the highest quality of ESA teams that allowed us to integrate that. So big kudos to ESA. We had really beautiful moments during the mission. We demonstrated the first brain-machine interface in space ever tested, which pushes the boundaries of science.
And that concludes Midday Report. Thank you so much for joining us here on TVP World, and stay tuned for more on our channel. Goodbye.